Pardon the interruption. I'm Jarrett Roser, and Sam, can you believe Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser spotlighted a Louisiana high school quarterback on ESPN this week?
Yeah, Jared, I can. Louisiana is a quarterback state for 2027.
Right. And look, job's not finished. Hashtag. Look, this is Recruit That Boot on the Louisiana vs. All Y'all channel. I'm Jarrett Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman. We're going to talk about that high school quarterback, Peyton Houston, just a sophomore, and already has an 800-yard passing performance under his belt in just his sixth start. We'll talk a little bit about Nate Shepard, a guy who has kind of quietly, I guess, become the MVP of this show through the however many months we've been doing this. Had a chance to see Nate live on Friday, and we'll talk about a big weekend for LSU hosting Ole Miss and an awful lot of recruits Saturday night in Death Valley, including a new commitment. And that's kind of where we'll start is Jacob Bradford, another guy that we've talked a little bit about on this show, ends up backing off of his Houston commitment Thursday night, announcing his commitment to LSU on Saturday. And I don't think a whole lot of surprise for us as any of it unfolded, but a really nice, versatile, and physical addition to that 2025 DB class for the Tigers.
Yeah. I think, on this podcast, we had spoken over the summer and camp season of what this DB group was going to look like at Corey Raymond's first year back, Blake Baker's first year back in Baton Rouge. And I think that, to some degree, we're a little bit underwhelmed. Jabari Antoine, the state's top defensive back, had decommitted, and now has since committed to Miami. And since then, Corey Raymond has just kind of flipped into gear, went out and got some of the best in Texas. But really, he's figured out who he wanted in state. I think, because Corey was away in the swamp, I feel like, Jared, give us credit. We kind of knew who the dudes were in the boot for 2025. And we started with Aiden Anding of Ruston, who we saw put on a show in the Dome. And before that, Jacob Bradford put on a show in the Dome. No, he wasn't tested with that Acadia in the passing game. That did not exist in the Superdome. But we did see him make Ben Watson-like tackle across the Superdome. We saw a little glimpse of his 4.5 speed. Jacob Bradford has since just quietly put together just another stellar season at Catholic. He rarely gets tested, and when he does, he often is there. Getting him on board. Now you see that they're just doing what LSU does, a trend that eventually catches up. They're keeping the best players in the state, the guys that you don't want to let leave the state stay. That's always been the trend for teams that have advanced to the national championship and have won. Jacob Bradford is a great foot in the door for this 2025 class that's competing for a top 5 group, again nationally, and another step forward as they try to lock in, potentially the number 1 safety for the 2026 class, who Jacob is very, very close to, I'm told.
Yeah, pretty close. They share a roof over there at the Bradford house. And you get into that. That was actually one of the follow-ups I had. But before we jump into the dynamic with Blaine, which very quickly became one of LSU fans' follow-ups, is okay, so like Blaine's going to come now too, right? Just in terms of the Jacob edition, I mentioned when tossing it to you, just sort of the versatility that he brings. They've got some guys in this class that I think they really like outside on the perimeter. That's where Jacob has lived through the bulk of his high school career, and he's very comfortable and confident doing that. He also brings a solid build in terms of his body type and his physicality in terms of his style of play that I think can translate well to a safety role at the next level. And he said that the coaches at LSU are talking to him a lot about sort of a nickel slot type corner role and maybe being able to have some versatility. And so I think that's a really nice piece when you look at some of the other guys they have in there. Jace Thomas, who's speedy, rangy, has some physicality to his game that has impressed us at times, but looks a little bit more like the back end safety at the next level for the Tigers. And the addition of Jacob with all of these other pieces, I think fits really nicely in terms of putting together for the nenext several years that kind of puzzle for Corey Raymond and Jake Olson.
Yeah, well, we're seeing a little bit. Corey Raymond, he likes his nickels, and he's learned his lesson since Amik Robertson. And Louisiana produces a lot of really talented nickel prospects, and Jacob has all the DNA to be he's a perfect fit in the nickel. He, like you said, he's battle tested covering on the outside. He's great in coverage. He's a bit of a ball hawk. He had multiple interceptions last year. Like I said, people don't throw his way anymore for a reason, but he's awfully physical. He's not only fast, but he's quick. And those are all the right ingredients for a talented nickel. And I think in the SEC, now, again, this is 2024. They throw the ball quite a bit, so you need your nickel on the field for, if not first down, second and third, and sometimes fourth. And I think that'll be a role that he takes to very easily right down the road under Corey Raymond's watch.
I think both of the Bradford brothers have been comfortable enough through their recruiting processes with the dynamic of, hey, we may not be together at the next level. They've been open to finding the best fit for each of them. Of course, a lot of those conversations were happening before they both had hometown LSU on the offer list. How confident are you at this point, still with a year left for Blaine, that he ultimately ends up an LSU Tiger as well? How surprised would you be if he ends up anywhere else, really, whether that be in Alabama, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Oregon, Ohio State, et cetera, basically anywhere not in purple and gold? How surprised would you be at this point?
I would be very surprised if he was at Texas A&M. I'll say that. Listen, he has that. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't end up at LSU. He was back over the weekend. He'll be back for the Alabama game in a few weeks. But he's also going to head back up to Ohio State. He's been to Alabama for the Georgia game, which was, you have to remember, a pretty exciting game. And he's heavily coveted by Texas and Notre Dame as well. I think Blaine is going to go through the process. It's going to be a little bit more arduous because he's going to have to, make a little bit more official visits. Jacob went to Tech, to Houston, and also to LSU in season. I think Blaine will end up taking his official visits, but in the end, I think it's going to be really hard for LSU to lose here. I think he got a glimpse into where he was really looking forward to seeing, getting to know more where he camped this summer, which was at LSU, at Alabama, and Ohio State. And to no surprise, those are the three games or the three teams he's going to see in season, with LSU and Ohio State up next over the few weeks. But LSU has made what does LSU do well? They keep their best players in the state. They circling back and getting Jacob on board, beating out Houston. That really was, they were in Baton Rouge last week, continuing to recruit at Catholic High. They did not want to see this talented defensive back go. For LSU to get Jacob on board, I think that obviously is laying the groundwork for BK, for Jake Thompson or Jake Olson, Blake Baker, that whole crew, Joe Sloan, Frank Wilson, you name it. They're all working on Blaine Bradford. That whole staff wants him. I think it'll be hard for them to lose in this one.
You just brought up another piece that I didn't really plan to get into, but just kind of came to mind with Houston hoping to not lose Jacob last week. Jacob was a key piece of that 4 Louisiana prospect commitment group out there to the Cougars, with Kyle Johnson, DK Mays, Rashad Sterling, who also has an LSU offer, and that's where I'll be on Friday night, is going to see Lutcher versus E.D. White. How concerned, as this season progresses and other schools continue to try to pull those guys from the Cougars class, whether it be an LSU or a Tulane or whoever the case may be, maybe another out-of-state school, how tough is it going to be potentially for Houston to hang on to some of those other guys, or is Jacob going to be the only one that ends up flipping off of those 4?
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with Rashad, but the thing about this Houston squad is I think Willie Fritz and his staff, they've done this before. They've come to Tulane and they didn't hit the ground running when they got uptown. It took a minute to get their feet wet, to get the program where they deemed it to be, and eventually brought it to that new height. And I think that the kids are believing in the staff. They're all proven guys. They're all excellent coaches. And they're all really, really great recruiters. They're obviously great evaluators that put early offers on the table for these guys when they were at Tulane, when they got to Houston, and are now, have been fending off an array of different programs for these guys. Obviously, it works 2 different ways when a team is struggling on the field like this. In one capacity, if you're a talented guy, you say, I can go there and I can work my way onto the field and I can help them kind of turn things around. Or you say, I want to be a part of a winning program and I want to step in and be a part of that winning tradition. So I will explore my other options. For some, like Jacob, I think is kind of the latter. I think it's, I want to come in and be a part of a championship program. That's kind of the Curdog way. It's kind of it would be an odd year if they're not playing in the semifinals or in the Superdome, or once in Natchitoches. But it's sometimes it takes the right kid to be willing to be a part of a program that might be rebuilding or just having an off year. So we'll see what happens with guys like Rashad. But to those other guys you mentioned, that's DK Mays and the kid up in North Louisiana, in Cecilia. You got to credit Coach Fritz and that staff for holding on.
Bunky, you mixing up your mixing up your rural 337 and 318 schools.
Been a long day there.
It's a lot of long days right now. Long right. Day on Saturday over at Tiger Stadium, but a good long day for the Tigers. You mentioned both the Bradford brothers were over there. I had a chance to see Blaine briefly. Jacob, I think, was still off with coaches. It was kind of his day over there as the new commitment to that 2025 class. But that place was loaded with not just talent on the field, but talent on the sidelines taking that game in. And we've talked about in the past, I don't remember if we talked about it for this game or certainly the Cajuns and Green Wave and just through the years. But a win or loss in a certain game isn't necessarily going to swing a guy's recruitment the way some fans might think it would. But what might swing a guy is going to see one of the best atmospheres and the thrilling environments and the electricity in Tiger Stadium that we saw on Saturday night. I mean, I know we've both had a chance to talk to some of these guys that were in town for that one. How wildly impressed have all of these guys seemed to be with just everything they saw from on the field to especially in the stands and just from start to finish that whole day in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, one game isn't going to shift the recruitment. But let me tell you this, if you're a 2026, if you're a 2027, an underclassman, that was your first nighttime game in Tiger Stadium, your first nighttime SEC game. It's obviously different when they play Nichols, and the game is kind of well in hand in the second half. But you and I have been there on a lot of different times, and that place gets loud. To be in that environment, to see two teams lighting up the scoreboard, to go into overtime, to get that drama that you kind of, that you hope that there's one game like that a week, and to be in that stadium, to be in that environment, to be around this staff that, we talk about it in a lot of different contexts here, especially in the way they recruit. But these are Louisiana guys. This is what they're selling you on. They're trying to say that if you are from Louisiana or you have dreamt of playing a game inside of the fans in Tiger Stadium, this is exactly what they're talking about. They don't have to do a lot of recruiting when this is what it's like. And especially for them to come out on top, they never led in that game. They went into overtime. They came out on top. The most exciting game in that stadium since when they beat Alabama. It might not, like you said, it might not sway a 26 or a 2027, but it's going to bring them back, and it's going to give them an experience that's going to live with them till they make that final official visit and sit down with the coaches and hear where they are on their board, and what the future holds for them. For some 2025s, though, that are maybe on the fence and went to LSU as a flip target, maybe it does push a couple over the limit.
The whole atmosphere there is so wild, and obviously the bulk of my college game day experiences are at the different Louisiana schools, unless I'm traveling for an LSU game elsewhere. But I just feel like there's a level of there's an aspect of, I tweeted on Saturday, it felt almost like a family reunion in a lot of ways. And there's an element that's almost like a red carpet type award show thing where I had to get held back trying to get onto the sideline because Shaq was walking up from a different direction as I got to the front of the line to get out onto the sideline. And so all of a sudden I'm walking in behind Shaq and watching heads turn from every direction and everything going on there. Odell is kind of prowling the sidelines with his hood on from his jacket. And I think some people don't even realize who it is, but then all of a sudden he kind of lifts his hood a little bit and people go absolutely ballistic. You've got Paul Skeens and Livy Dunn there who are, in their respective realms as famous as anyone right now. Saw some of the guys that we've covered for so long, and Duke Riley and Mike Divinity, and that list goes on. Jets was out there. And so it's just a lot going on for a high school prospect and and their family to be there and see and feel the energy and enthusiasm. I don't know that there are a lot of places that fully match some of that as we see in Tiger Stadium for a big nighttime game.
Yeah, well, you hit on it. If there's in the as you're Joe Sloan or Cortez Hankton and Frank Wilson saying you could be the next Newman star at LSU, the next great wide receiver at LSU, the next great Destrehan star at LSU, and you can look over at Odell Beckham and then at Justin Jefferson, or you can look at one of their most notable alumni like Shaq, who obviously went out of his way to help create an NIL sponsorship for Angel Reese, and is a big part of the Amazon Prime documentary. I'm like 4 episodes in already. I'm finally catching up. It's awesome. I mean, this is what recruits care about. These are recruiting pitches in real life that you can, and again, for the game to match. I mean, if they lost, you would still hear kids rave about that environment. But for this program that is still competing for a college football playoff spot, that still has its hopes alive in the SEC, that has kind of found its gear on offense and really on defense as the season goes on, and these new faces and these new coaches get more acclimated and find their rhythm. It's a big moment for LSU's season as well. And I definitely I bet the over in that game, but I did not have a lot of confidence. I really could have seen it going either way, like pretty easily. And obviously it was a close game. I think we'll see if it's what it does for Ole Miss for the second half of the season. I'm curious because and how LSU kind of keeps going with this momentum.
We talked about it at the beginning. It was kind of the PTI tease to start this, but jumping into it, Peyton Houston of Evangel Christian, a guy who we've talked about repeatedly on this show, completed 53 of his 68 passes Thursday night against Captain Shreve for 817 yards and 8 passing touchdowns, had another 2 rushing touchdowns with, I think, 88 yards with his legs, and ends up being all over the internet for the days to come. Based on the NFHS record book, he's the first quarterback ever to throw for over 800 yards. Reminder, this is just his 6th start of varsity football. And then on Monday, he's featured in the big finish of PTI. What has it been like to take me back to when you hear of this unfolding in Shreveport on Thursday night, and if you're kind of clearing your eyes or doing a double take at Twitter or whatever it is, and what it's been like to watch the fanfare that's kind of followed.
Well, I think that we should, for future segments, I'll have to talk to the producer after we're done, but we need like an alert or like a Staples Easy button for like our guys. So like Pop Houston, our guy.
Do you want it to turn into like a Pee Wee Herman like word of the day where something crazy happens and there's like confetti flying if we mention one of the guys that's a consistent quote unquote our guy?
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with confetti. Where was I? Multiple people had sent it to me. I was also on the East Coast, so it was a little bit later for me. And then to kind of look at the numbers, like when I woke up, to be like, did I dream that happened? No. And I got up pretty early the following day too, so that was a little bit of a mess. But no, Peyton Houston has been working toward this moment for some time. It's almost no surprise that he's come out so ready to play as a sophomore, considering the story behind the scenes of obviously transferring from Calvary to Evangel, and obviously the details that go into way further discussion off air about the quarterback battles over there in the 318. But the fact that he's kind of hit the ground running, I mean, we talked about his season before this 800-yard performance, and that, these are his first few varsity starts, and it's incredible that even though that Evangel doesn't have the record that you would hope for, could you imagine if Gabe was still on this team, Gabe Relaford, the talented LSU defensive lineman? This defense is hard pressed to get a stop. So this offense is lighting it up, and they're going to win their shootouts. And Pop just he's just ready for this moment. If he wasn't, it would, I don't want to say I expected him to kind of have a little bit of rust or a little bit of, taking time to adjust and be this starter. But I feel almost stupid for saying that, because we know the way that he prepares. We know the immense talent that he has. We know the drive that he has. So for him and all the hard work behind the scenes of getting to know his teammates and get acclimated into Evangel locker room and with his teammates, that offense so quickly, I'm not that surprised. And it's great for him to get this national attention. His recruitment has already blossomed in the last couple of months since camp season. But now just, the proof is in the pudding. The hay is in the barn, whatever idiom you'd like to use. Pop Houston is a dude. He's our guy. Let it rain. And it's just fun to watch it all unfold, and to do so at a national spotlight for a North Louisiana kid that is great on the field, and also, like, as you can attest to, is a great kid off the field as well.
It was a little bit surreal. I got a call from Daniel, who's my co-host on the Podness show, and we had used one of Joel Rogers' 318 Sports clips of a great play from Pop on Thursday night as one of the play of the week candidates for this week. And so Daniel was kind of aware of this from afar, and then is, I guess, just going about his day, and has PTI on in the background, and calls me and tells me, hey, the guy that we were just talking about earlier when we recorded is on PTI right now. And it was a little bit surreal to go back and find that clip. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but it just didn't feel real to be watching a kid that we've been hearing about and watching clips of since he was like 6 or 7 years old, and been knowing for the last 3 or 4 years or whatever it's been, suddenly on Pardon the Interruption, a show that I've been watching since whenever it started when we were kids. But yeah, I mean, talking to Coach and Pastor Denny Duran on Friday, and he kind of joked about, look, you've known him longer than I have. You know he's a good kid. And I didn't know how much of that was just reminding, hey, he came here on his own this year, sort of thing, and how much was I don't know. It was just fun kind of catching up with Coach, and he mentioned him mentioning Brock Berlin, the Louisiana all-time passing leader, and a guy who set a lot of records there years back in Coach Duran's previous
former Louisiana passing leader.
The talking to Denny about Brock, who's now the OC of the middle school team and kind of getting into his coaching career, being on the sidelines on Friday nights, or in this case Thursday night, and just kind of learning their process, I guess, on a typical game night as he grows in his role back at his alma mater, and them just joking about, look, we've been through some battles. Have you ever seen anything quite like this? And those guys who have seen so much Louisiana high school football through the years, and obviously on to next levels as well, saying, no, I've never seen anything like this kid throwing for numbers that most guys can't do in a video game, let alone in an actual game on a Thursday night. It's all pretty wild. And we talk about the 817, but Pop's completion total ended up being in the top 10 or 15 nationally, according to the Federation of High School Athletics record book. His total touchdowns are up there, et cetera, et cetera. The attempt total was not nearly as high, though, which speaks to his efficiency, that the completion and the yardage and the touchdowns and all those things are up there, but not the attempt total. So bro, you throw 68 passes and complete 53 of them in your 6th start ever as a high school quarterback. Absolutely insane.
Big plays only from Pop Houston.
And again, he has one of those big plays as one of the play of the week candidates over at Podness. So if folks want to vote, we'll pick the winner later this week and announce it. It's been a season of big performances. We talk about Pop. In that same game, Jamarcier Plater sets a Captain Shreve rushing record with 352 yards. Brody Savage, the Captain Shreve quarterback, sets a school record with 462 yards, I believe. Another guy that we've watched closely, saw in the Dome last year, Dedrick Lasty, who is pound for pound maybe the most productive, prolific athlete in the state right now, because he's all of 5'4", but rushed for 540 yards on Friday night. You talk about the Shreveport quarterbacks. Ben Taylor's doing huge things at Airline. Abram Wardell doing huge things at Calvary Baptist. Down south, the DeBetta brothers just set Acadiana single game records with 5 passing touchdowns, 4 passing receptions for TDs. And so it's just been a wild season to try and keep up with around Louisiana. How much of that has gotten over to you in Austin on weeks like this where you're not in the state and suddenly records are falling for not only programs but state and people climbing up the national? Obviously you heard about Pop, but what's it like to hear this much happening around the boot?
It's a lot of FOMO mostly. Miss my state. But no, it's incredible. I mean, we also point out that so Juwan Johnson broke Brock Berlin's record last year. Was it Kendrick Law's record at Captain Shreve, the rushing record? Like who had
Quite possibly. I don't know. I just saw that Jamar Say set, I think the last 2 weeks he has set the record and then broken his own record in back-to-back weeks.
And Elijah Haven just reset the record. Obviously, we know that it wasn't exactly a very crazy, but it's a school record nonetheless. It's awesome because you have usually the context that this is Brock Berlin's record or Kendrick Law's record or whoever it may be. They're greats that came before them, and you've touched on someone like Dedrick Lastly, who is really just having a sensational season, and give him his credit down in the Riverside Rebels. Can you imagine if he was on St. Charles this year? If those teams just combined to make a St. John's Parish dynasty team. But no, it's fun. It's fun to hear that because there's big Nate Shepard is putting up big numbers every single week. You hear it. So some offenses, some programs just lend themselves to big performances, and that's fine. But a lot of these performances to be in the record books, to say I am the all-time leader or this is the most ever in one game. And to hear, really the Brock Berlin talking about Pop Houston's game, like that doesn't get any better for 318 Legends. That's what this as well as anyone. This is what makes this sport so fun. And yeah, it's fun about the offers. It's fun to see the evaluations, but the stories behind it and the history and the respect and the legends or the beginning or passing on of legends. It's awesome, passing the torch on to rather. So yeah, mostly FOMO to make it long.
You're doing a really great job of setting up the kind of passing of the torch from one subject to the next, because we did need to still talk about Nate Shepard, who I saw on Friday night rack up another 266 yards. He apologized after a little bit and said, look, I'm sorry. It wasn't another 6 touchdown, 7 touchdown game for me sort of thing. He had 2 and they won 35-33. Had a great game. Once again, his numbers are reaching up awful high through 6 weeks of action. And I asked him about how much is he hearing from some other schools trying to flip him away from Duke? And, was LSU one of them? Was he hearing much from Frank Wilson? And it sounds like it's been kind of quiet on the LSU front. I know for a fact that Tulane is still very aggressively hoping that they can keep him in state down there in New Orleans. But, despite some of the prolific performance through 6 weeks, LSU has still been a little bit cool. I think we're going to kind of quietly start to hear about some other SEC schools taking a closer look at Nate, though, and maybe LSU comes in a little bit later than that. But for guys like this, because I was asked a couple of times out there, what is the process? We talk sometimes about the process for rankings and evaluations and stuff like that. For guys like Nate who are having phenomenal senior seasons on your side now over at Rivals, what is kind of the process of when guys get looked at again for potentially being bumped to star? How much of that happens midseason? How much of it is getting held until, okay, let's see how this season plays out and then reevaluate it once we get a chance to kind of catch our breath?
Yeah. There are certain cases where kids are ranked or, not very often, but, receive a bump mid-season. We sometimes have a 4-star Friday where I don't even pick the names. It's I don't have the time for that, Jarrett. But largely, we have we will do a rankings update at the end of this month, because at the end of this month for much of the country, the high school season is either moving on to the playoffs or it's on the back 9 for sure. So midseason tape is kind of, you're ramping up your midseason tape. You're kind of piling up all the evaluations you've seen in person, or the guys that you've been writing or evaluating or talking about all fall. Nate being one of them, and then the rollout of these rankings, that's a whole different scenario we can get into off air, but I have no control over that. So sometimes the changes are in the works, and it could be, a 2-week process before they're publicized or live on a website. And that's the case, in different places all the time. Everyone has their own process. But it's sometimes it's just out of people's hands. And, the best advice I've ever gotten, Jarrett, is be patient, and it'll just work out for you if you believe it. Just like Christmas, if you believe that you're going to get a new video game or a new console, it just might be under that tree in a couple of weeks. And if you just stay patient and do all the right things, be less naughty and more nice, it might just work out for you on Christmas Day. You might get that gift. But really, it really will happen at the end of the regular season, more specifically.
Control the controllables and let Christmas come when Christmas comes. To be clear, this was not a Nate question regarding the Stars.
Sure, it wasn't. I'm sure it was some Richie Mills over at WGNO, right?
Correction. Garland Gillen was one of the people that asked me. Our other New Orleans television friend was one of the people that wanted to know what kind of the process was. And so that's something that I wanted to ask. But people are very curious for a guy like Nate, who also himself certainly does want to be considered a 4-star prospect and is doing everything he can and carrying that continued chip on his shoulder, even as a D1 commit and a guy that is starting to get a lot of attention. He's playing with an edge to himself for sure.
He certainly is.
So I don't have anything else for this week. I also don't have a Canadian flag to close it in PTI fashion. Tony Kornheiser, good night, Canada. So I think that's really kind of all we got. Sam, appreciate you as always for your time. Appreciate folks for tuning in. We ended up with more to talk about this week than I realized because guys just kind of went off once again. But hey, until next time, knuckleheads, good night, Canada.